Hello, welcome back. Last time we talked about fidelity and marriage. Today we're going to talk about value and talent. So, some things you should consider as we get into this topic. Remember, we're trying to find a moral law that's based on human nature, that is something we could make universal, and some things to think about as we start this law. One of the questions I want to ask you is, what is the source of the richness of life? What is true wealth? This gets us to the question of value. What is of value? And who owns what? So we have to talk about ownership, value. Another thing is, have you stolen anything lately? Have you stolen? Do you steal? And what is stealing? What is theft? All right, so all of these questions are going to bring us to focus on the issue of value. And what should we value? What do you value? Let's look at this law. Remember, origin, nature, law, applications, consequences. All right, the origin of this law is in this universal principle. We naturally value things, and no one values all things alike. We value things differently. So value is a universal. Everybody values something, but not everyone values everything the same way. Now let's talk a little bit about value and talent. How do we produce things of value? Do you want to produce something that is of value in your lifetime? And how would we know it was of value? So let's talk about value. Value is a function of supply and demand. So think about that. The greater the supply, the less the demand. The less the supply, the greater the demand. This is basic economics, right? So think about things that are in high demand. Usually they're more expensive, harder to come by. My brother recently called me and said, hey, can I borrow your video camera? And I said, why don't you just get your own? And he said, I can't. They're all sold out, and the used ones are selling for really high prices right now. And that's because everyone just went online. So my brother's having this issue with supply and demand. The supply is less, so the demand is high, and people charge more for things that people are demanding. So we understand this relationship. Now, what makes demand? Demand is a function of one's view of the good. So we want things, we demand things that are connected to our view of the good. So perhaps these cameras are in high demand because people need to, make videos so they could support themselves and carry on surviving. Maybe they want to produce things that are of value for other people. Maybe they think being creative is how they will contribute to the good. So there are a number of reasons people might have for demanding things, such as a camera. But demand is a function of one's view of the good. So you should stop and think about, why do I want the things that I want? And how does that point to my view of the good? All right, now what about supply? How is it that these webcams, I'm looking at one right now, how is it that these webcams are in short supply? And could we fix that? Sure, we could fix that by someone figuring out how to produce them more quickly. Right? So supply is a function of talent. And this is going to get us into this moral law, how it's connected to human nature. So supply is a function of talent. So when there's short supply and there's high demand, we'll figure out how to create what is of value. And it's based on our talent. Oftentimes, entrepreneurial people will find a way, right? This is how to make some money off of high demand, right? So let's talk a little bit about talent. What is talent? Do you have talent? Don't tell me that you don't, because you do. Talent is an ability to achieve some aspect of the good. So we all have talent because we all have an ability to achieve some aspect of the good. This is how it's going to be connected to human nature. First, we all value things, and second, we all have talent. Talent is in each person, and talent is grounded in the level of our uniqueness. Remember, we talked about different levels of personality. We talked about we're rational political animals. We have presupposition, personality, background, uniqueness, and mood. So uniqueness is where your talent is, and your particular way of contributing to the good. So you could think about other people in history who had a unique contribution to the good. Think of artists, maybe musicians, maybe inventors, doctors, scientists. You can think of Einstein, Mozart, Van Gogh, all of these. And normal people too. I mean, these are people we, hold up as exemplars in their field, but everyone has the ability to achieve some aspect of the good because there's talent in each. Now, where did we get the talent, though? This is going to be, again, getting us back to metaphysics. The origin of one's talent is in the origin of one's being. So you have to think about that. Where did I come from? And it's not attributable to your parents because you're unique, different than them. So where is the origin of talent? And it's in each person, talent. So we didn't give it to ourselves. We find ourselves with this talent. And we also have to think about, is it for me only? Or is talent given to me and it's for all, for the unique contribution to the good for all people, the human project, as I've been calling it. So talent is given to each and it's for all. Think about that. You don't have to agree with me, but you should think about it. And if it is given for all, and we don't contribute, we don't develop our talent, is this where stealing comes in? Talent, how do you know what your talent is? You can know your talent by your interests and your abilities. What are you interested in and what are you good at? Now think about interest in very broad categories. We talked about personalities where we have some people are more intellectually inclined, philosophical. Some are more emotionally inclined, psychological. Some are more practically inclined, practical doers. So we have intellect, emotion, and will. All of us have those three aspects in our personality, but one of those will be dominant. Our interest, what calls you, what are you interested in, and your abilities, what are you able to do? I mean, I might be interested in, say, surfing, but I'm not good at it. So that's probably not my talent. Surfing is not my talent. Talent is developed through other people encouraging you, like teachers and coaches and parents, and by our own efforts. So we have to work at it. For example, maybe my talent is teaching, and other people saw that in me when I was younger and encouraged me in that. Even when I was resistant, I was not going to be a teacher. But I had other mentors who said, you would be a great teacher, so you should try this. So I tried it. And I also had to work hard. I'm still having to work hard learning how to make videos. So it's an effort of one's own, and it's by the effort of others. This is going to be important later when we get to a theory of values. Talent is developed fully when we keep the good in mind. So we can be talented and develop it partially or not develop it at all because we don't have the good in mind. So the good is the goal. Remember the unifying principle of our life. So if we have the good in mind, and we say the good is knowledge and knowledge of ultimate reality, then how can I develop my talent with that in mind? And I've been calling this the human project. So how can I develop my talent in pursuit of contributing to the human project? And if you have the good, you will develop it fully. You will become excellent at what you do. Talent is irrepressible. You can't hold it down. When you fully develop your talent, talent forms its function. So here's an example. Again, people said, oh, you'd be a really good teacher. And I thought, I want to do philosophy. Well, there are a lot of people in my life that said, don't do philosophy. You'll never get a job. So a job is a practical concern, but on a philosophical level, on the level of seeking the good and knowing the good and contributing to the good, I knew I could contribute to the good. So I thought the job is secondary. Developing my talents in pursuit of the good, and I wanted to do it through philosophy and through teaching. I knew I'd find a way to do that, to express my talent, even if it didn't pay. Okay, it didn't pay money, but it paid in terms of meaning and giving back. And I don't know, when you know the good through exercising your talent, that's very satisfying. So talent, when developed, it forms its function. So don't let people scare you into not majoring in a certain thing or not pursuing a certain talented pursuit. I don't know, like music maybe, because you're not going to make money. Think of money as secondary, and contributing to the human project or the good is primary. You can do both. You can have dual tracks. Okay, so let's talk about the law. That was all the nature about talent. Let's talk about the law. Now, see if we want to make this into a universal moral principle. You can, say, no, I don't think so, and maybe drop me a line as to why you don't think so, but listen to this. One is to develop one's talent in pursuit of the good in service to others. Failure to do so is to take from others what is of value, what belongs to them. So we ought to develop our talent in pursuit of the good, and if we don't, that's considered stealing from others, stealing from humanity. Now think about this. Do we owe humanity? Do we have a debt to our ancestors? I think we do. I find myself with all of these tools right at my fingertips that I didn't invent, and all this history of philosophy that I could talk about for forever that I didn't come up with. I have inherited a very rich tradition that I'm building upon. So do I owe it to those persons who invested their lives into work towards the good? Do I owe it to pay it forward, to contribute to the future? I think so. That's why I'm doing this, right? So think about that. Are we stealing if we don't develop our talents in pursuit of the good? Let's pause here and look at some of the applications. So here's where we've been. We've gone over the origin of this one. We naturally value things. The nature values a function of supply and demand, demands a function of one's view of the good, and supply is a function of talent. Then we said we ought to pursue our talent, and if we don't, that's stealing from others. Stealing from the future, stealing from the human project. We benefit from it and we don't give back. Seems like there's a moral obligation involved here. All right, let's look at some of the applications. So one of the things that this moral law would be opposed to is the failure to develop one's talent. And we could do that by being slothful. You know what sloth is? It's kind of laziness isn't the right word, but it's a kind of existential apathy. Meh. Everything is meh. It's a failure to find meaning in the world, and if you don't find meaning, you won't develop your talent. So you don't know the good, so you don't develop your talent. Sloth. Acedia is the original word for it. You should look that up. Acedia. It's a good, rich concept. It's like metaphysical boredom. We could fail to develop our talent because greed is what's driving us. Are we pursuing money instead of the good? Am I going to become, I guess probably becoming a philosophy teacher isn't ever going to get you money, but let's say a doctor. Sometimes people want to be a doctor so they could make a lot of money. Maybe they're not really good at being a doctor, so we should consider that. Someone could fail to develop their talent because of pride. Pride is where we take credit for our talent, and we might think we're so great, and we aren't recognizing that other people contributed to where we are. So we fail to recognize the corporate element to development of talent, and so we take credit for it. And notice these are vices. We've been talking about virtue. These are vices. So sloth, greed, pride, some of the 7 deadly sins, which are the opposite of the virtues. We could misuse our talent. We could misuse our talent when we don't pursue the good. We use our talent for something else. Usually it's money, right? Or fame, or power. So we could misuse our talent. Now, let's talk about theories of value or economic theories. Remember when we talked about the institutions of culture? The institution of the economy or business comes into play here. How does the moral law direct us in terms of how the economy should go? And right now we often argue about capitalism versus communism or socialism of some sort. And both of those could have problems, do have problems. So capitalism, and let's just say unbridled capitalism, because in the past I've told you I am a capitalist, but not an unbridled capitalist where greed is good, right? So capitalism is the view that human beings individually own things. I'm the owner of my stuff. So individuals own absolutely. And that's a mistake because it fails to recognize the individual didn't make themselves. We often talk about the self-made man. That's a myth, right? There is a community that helped you to get where you are, and if it isn't the community that's currently alive, there's a whole history of humanity that enabled us to make the kind of progress that allows us to be where we are now. So individualism fails to recognize the community of humans that helped us to get to where we are. But communism has another flaw. Communism is the recognition of the community, but the communism is a view that humans own collectively, usually centered in the state. The state owns absolutely. Now here's the problem. Nobody owns absolutely. And communism, the collective owns absolutely, fails to recognize the contribution of the individual in their development of talent. So there's a collective element and an individual element to the development of talent and the value that comes from the talent that is developed. So we have to recognize there's an assumption in capitalism and communism, and that's that man owns absolutely. Now, we could think of an alternative to capitalism and communism. I think it's a great concept. You can research it some more. It's called stewardship. And stewardship recognizes that humans don't own anything absolutely. You don't take anything with you when you die. And you are like a manager over what you have in this life, including your talent. You have what you have for a limited time, and it is for the good, and we should use it for the good, and we should pass it on to the next generation for the good. And so we're stewards, we're managers of what we have. And we should also recognize we didn't give ourselves talent. We aren't the origin of our talent. We find ourselves with it. And we also should maybe give credit to the origin of talent, recognizing that there's some grace involved in having talent and developing it, and contributing to the richness of the world. So the economy is about economics. Household management really is what it's about, but it's the household of, it used to be a human household, but now we live in a whole global system of economics. And if we think about it in a broader sense, we want to produce wealth. And wealth isn't just monetary. If you think about it, money is just a placeholder for things that are of value. So, I don't know, paper money. We don't even use paper money much anymore. But let's say dollars. We agree that these dollars represent value. And we kind of have this agreement about value. And we use money because it's easier than, say, bartering. Like, it's easier for you to pay this school, and the school pays me to teach you, rather than you, washing my windows and I'll teach you. So money is a placeholder of value. And value is the richness of life. Wealth is the richness of life. And it isn't necessarily monetary. Money's just the placeholder. So to wrap up this discussion of applications, let's just go back and say, actually just this application, capitalism and communism share the assumption that man owns absolutely. We don't own absolutely. We have what we have for a time, and it's for the purpose of the good. Okay, now, sometimes in economics, we talk about a finite supply. They give us this pie graph, and this is the amount of resources that we have in the world, and people fight over these resources, and there's only a finite supply, and once it's gone, then oh no, we're doomed. But is that true? Is there a finite supply of resources? Or is it there's a finite supply of our thinking about what we could do with the resources? So we shouldn't make social policies based on finite supply when there's a practically infinite supply of talent. So let's say we're going to run out of oil. Okay, so what? We can't drive anymore? We can't get around anymore? No, we'll find a better way. And we're always looking for a better way. Someone will develop a better way to have cleaner, better burning energy. So sometimes suffering presses us to develop talent. So we need to understand scarcity. Is there actual scarcity in the world? Is there a scarcity of food? No, there's not a scarcity of food. We haven't been pressed to figure out how best to feed everyone. We could if we wanted to, but we haven't suffered enough maybe. So the failure to develop our talent is really what is scarce. People haven't developed their talent. So if there's scarcity, it's because we haven't developed talent. So again, we ought to develop our talent so that we ease the burden of natural evil, but maybe to develop our talent will require us to overcome moral evil first. We have to see the good in order to develop our talent for the good. Okay, let me just do a couple more applications here. It's opposed to economic policies which create disincentives to effort. This has to do with taxation. How much should we be taxed? What should we be taxed for? What should the government supply to us? Should the government supply anything to us? What is the purpose of the government? The purpose of the government is to protect life and property of citizens. But the government, we talked about this when we talked about the institutions, the government often goes beyond its form and function and starts doing the job of economics, taxing us beyond what is needed for life and protection for other things. Should the government give us a living wage? Why? Will some people fail to develop their talent if they're given a living wage? Well, if you can survive off the money from the government, are you going to be inclined to develop your talent? I know there's Marxist arguments. Well, if I had my needs met, then I would be able to develop my talent. Why can't we do both? Why can't we have our needs met because we've developed our talents and because we value the right things? Sometimes our needs aren't met because we spend our money on things that aren't of value. We have our values mixed up. All right, so the higher the taxes, the less inclined people are to work harder. All right, the next application, this moral law is opposed to wasteful spending of resources which does not advance the good. So we individually, households, we use our money on things that don't promote the good. We waste our time, our effort, our energy on things that aren't valuable. This is like consumer culture. It could be the government spending our resources, wasting tax dollars. So you can think about it on an individual level, on a household level, state, local level, government, federal government level. A lot of resources are wasted on things that aren't promoting the good or advancing the good. Think about your life. A lot of people are into minimalism lately, or simplifying. I went through this too. Like, let's see what is in the house that we don't need and that we can donate to others. Simplify our lives. Streamline your life in pursuit of the good. What am I spending my money on, and is it worth it? Do I need these things, or is it something that makes me more comfortable, or pleasure is derived from these things? And how is that connected to the good? Okay, last application is opposed to the unlimited accumulation of wealth by what indebts others. So think about this. There are disputes raging right now about the super rich and the disparity of income that there is between the super rich and those who are at the bottom rung of society. There's a shrinking middle class. And the super rich, how did they get to be super rich? Are they making money on the backs of others? Is there oppression involved? Is there a way that we could manage household debt and national debt? We just seem to be accumulating more and more debt. How do we deal with that? The Jews had a concept of Jubilee in the Old Testament, or in the Hebrew Scriptures. And Jubilee was every 50 years, all the debts are canceled. They also had this idea of every 7 years, debts are canceled. So you might be indentured as a servant for 7 years because you were spending irresponsibly, but after 7 years, you were free of your debt. And every 50 years, the original ownership of property went back to the family. So there's this idea where we can cancel debt every 50 years and not allow wealth to accumulate in the hands of a few families that continue to grow and increase in wealth and indenture the rest of us. So there are economic disparities in the world. It has gotten rather crazy, and there are solutions to these problems if we think about it and develop our talent in this area of thinking hard about how can we do economics better? How can we do economics for the good? Okay, I feel like we should wrap this one up. We're going a little bit long. So let's talk about the consequences of this one. The consequences are the neglect or abuse of talent increases the poverty of life for all. So the less we use our talent to increase the good, the more poverty will increase. So as talent goes down, poverty goes up. But the other side, the good news, is that the use of talent for the good increases the richness of life for all. So the more we use our talents and develop it, think about that. If you're using your talent and you're developing it and you're producing something of excellence, that's going to increase the wealth for all of us. Not just money, the riches of life, the things that are valuable, the things that are beautiful, the things that are good. So if we're developing our talent in pursuit of the good, everyone in society is doing this, then think about we would be fully employed and we would not have debt. We would know where to put our money and know what to buy and what is of value. And we would buy things that are valuable so that we could enjoy the good more. So think about this one. Do we want to make this into a moral law? You should develop your talent in pursuit of the good. And to fail to do so is to steal what is of value from others, particularly from the future generations. All right, that was a lot. This one went long, but I feel like we covered a lot of good ground. We covered value and talent. All right, next time we'll talk about truth and justice. Are you a social justice warrior? This one's for you. All right.